You're listening to the Cyberwire Network, powered by N2K.
What we've seen over the last several years is that credentials are increasingly being used as the point of entry into corporate networks, which then leads to really large ransomware incidents.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CyberWire's Hacking Humans podcast, where each week we look behind the social engineering scams, phishing schemes, and criminal exploits that are making headlines and taking a heavy toll on organizations around the world. I'm Dave Bittner, and joining me is Joe Kerrigan from Harbor Labs and the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute. Hello, Joe.
Hi, Dave.
Got some good stories to share this week. And later in the show, Keith Jarvis, senior security researcher at SecureWorks, joins us to talk about stealers and trackers. But first, a word from our sponsors at KnowBe4. Even if you don't know it, your organization has a security culture. We should all strive for a strong one, with users reporting phishing emails as soon as they see them and discussing the latest news-making data breach around the water cooler. But we also live in the real world. Many organizations likely have a security culture that could use some improvement. KnowBe4 has been leading the push to improve organizational security cultures through new school security awareness training for a little more than a decade. Stay with us, and in a few minutes, we'll hear from our sponsors at KnowBe4 about a new way to build your security culture to be the best it can be. All right, Joe, before we jump into our stories here, we have a bit of follow-up. Do you want me to read this?
Oh, sure. This would be great.
All right. So a listener named Ron writes in and says, "Hey, gentlemen, I've been a longtime listener and constant learner from your show. I teach military members about personal cybersecurity and how to be safer on the internet. I cite your show as a top pick for those wanting to start out in digital privacy and security, and zero regrets. Every week I'm given new and heavy-hitting examples of how bad things can get, but I leave each show feeling somehow better about our chances to overcome them." Well, thank you, Ron. That's very kind of you.
Very kind words, Ron.
Yeah. Anyway, another top pick I push on my students is a book by Kerry Parker called Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons. Have you heard of it? Have you heard of it?
I have not.
Me neither. Ron says, "Let me throw in here that I am in no way affiliated with the author or his work, but in my library of books on internet safety and security, this one happens to be the most accessible, in my opinion, for newcomers to the realm, and much of what you discuss is covered too." He says, "Thanks in advance, and please keep doing what you do. It makes my job easier."
So I looked up this book on Amazon, and Kerry Parker is about to come out with a 5th edition of this book.
Oh, wow.
So I wanted to just go out and buy it, but if I see that he's going to going to come out with a 5th edition, I might hold off until that comes out.
Okay.
The library system around here does not have it, so I couldn't just go and read it for free at the library like some kind of software pirate. I don't know. I kind of always feel that way when I read a book at the library, like I'm not paying the author to do it.
The book still gets sold.
You're right. But I still go to the library. It doesn't bother me that much.
Yeah.
And frequently I do buy the books.
Yeah.
Not that I need to justify that. I don't know why I feel like I do. But anyway.
There's no guilt or shame in using your public library, Joe.
Right, yeah. It's a great place, a great resource. I think we should probably reach out to Kerry Parker, see if we can get him on the show.
Yeah.
It would be a great idea.
Yeah, that is a great idea. We'll do it. I like the idea of dragons also.
Right.
I think about sometimes, I know you and I have discussed this in the past, that I like the metaphor of, the little town below the mountain, and up on the mountain there's a dragon.
Right.
And the town has to decide, do we kill the dragon, or are we okay with the dragon every now and then flying down from the mountain and picking somebody off to eat?
Right.
And that's a decision sometimes you have to make, and so I like that. I'm intrigued by the metaphor, so.
Yeah, it's just the same as the Skill and Charybdis problem,
Yeah. All right. Well, Ron, thank you for writing in. We do appreciate it, and we will check out that book. Again, it's called Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons. All right, Joe, let's jump into our stories this week. I'm going to kick things off for us. And my story this week comes from ISMS Online, which I believe stands for Information Security Management Services Online. This is it's an organization that provides certifications and helps organizations make sure that they're following regulations and so on and so forth. But they also have a blog section here, and there's an article here written by Dan Raywood, and it's titled Password Managers, a Work in Progress Despite Popularity.
Yeah.
And I think this is sort of triggered by some of the, shall we say, challenges that some of the password management companies have had as of late.
Right.
I think most famously LastPass.
Yes.
Who's had a
breach.
Had a breach and sort of, I don't know, cascading isn't quite the right word. A series of revelations that have come from that breach that have sort of trickled out about the seriousness of that breach and the degree to which that breach is an issue. It's uncovered perhaps some shortcomings in some of the ways that LastPass handled some of their encryption, what they chose to encrypt or didn't encrypt, the amount of encryption that your files had applied to them, and some of it, I believe, depended on how long you've had a LastPass account.
So they never upgraded the encryption over time.
Yes, right, exactly. So in a way, they did upgrade the encryption over time, but they didn't retroactively go back and re-encrypt stuff from people from the old customers who had originally come on board when they were using a lower level of encryption.
Right. Which, if the customer is still using the product, there's a fairly standardized way of going about updating the encryption.
Yeah.
It's the same with hashing algorithms.
Okay.
The customer has to log in for a hashing algorithm. They have to use if you're going to upgrade your hashing algorithm, then in these hashes, there's a little indicator of what algorithm was used to hash it.
Yeah.
So if you see that that's out of date, then you check it with the old algorithm, and when it matches, you rehash it with the new algorithm and just put it back in the system. And that's how you do it. And the same thing can be done with the encryption on these devices. But the user does have to log in, depending on the level of encryption that these companies have. Now, LastPass always claimed that you were the only person that could decrypt your data.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
So if they can't decrypt it, they can't do this unless you log in.
Right. And I think they're recommending one of the things you do is change your master password to something complex and long, and I think that triggers the encryption of everything. So that's
but that shouldn't be necessary. You should just be able to re-encrypt it just by them using the service again.
Yeah. So the fundamental question that this article asks is: are password managers to be trusted? And I wanted to put that question in front of you here, Joe.
Yeah.
What do you think?
That's a good question. Well, we talked about that. We've addressed this risk before. That you are putting all your fish all your eggs. That's the analogy. All your eggs in one basket, right? But it's a pretty good basket. So, I don't know. Do you use LastPass or OnePassword?
We have used LastPass. Yes.
Can you protect that with a multi-factor authentication, like a FIDO key or something?
Yes, and I do.
Okay, so if you do that, these guys are never going to break whatever was encrypted on that. They're just not going to have the information. Even with all the brute forcing in the world, they're just never going to be able to get through that. So that data is pretty safe. But the question then is, what was encrypted? Well, everything should have been encrypted, but
it turns out
not.
Right.
I mean, there are personal solutions. I still don't like the idea of browser based password managers. Microsoft has a password manager. Google now has a password manager, but it's fairly integrated with the Chrome browser, so I'm not sure how much I like it. Firefox has one built into it. I'm sure it's better than it ever was, but you're still storing your data in the browser.
Apple has one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Microsoft's is actually separate. It's part of an application called Microsoft Authenticator. So it's I feel better about that one. But I've started using KeePass because it runs on Linux and Windows. I think there might even be an Apple version for it.
Okay.
But I'm moving away from password safe because there's no Linux-based implementation that lets you use a YubiKey.
Okay.
So I use the YubiKey on my local on my Windows machine, but when I need to move the data or when I need to put this on a Linux machine, I need to take that protection off of it. And since I store that in the cloud, I don't want to do that.
Right.
But KeePass lets me do everything, and it's open source and free. But then I have to manage the passwords, and I'm already running into an issue where I've got databases out of sync. I am okay with this because it's number one, it's free and I'm cheap. Number two, I'm pretty sure that this kind of a problem is not going to happen. This LastPass problem is not going to happen with KeePass. Even if the bad guys do get my file, it is completely encrypted with the algorithm. The entire file is encrypted, and they're going to need my YubiKey to open it. Which is they're going to have to physically access me, and at that point in time, I have a different set of problems.
I wonder if the incident that LastPass has gone through here, and I guess it's better to say the incident that LastPass's users have gone through here, is that an indication that maybe something that is open source is better because, or at least to be considered, because that would have the scrutiny of people looking at it. I think a lot of LastPass users were surprised after this breach to find out that when their vaults were stolen, that not everything in the vault was encrypted.
Right.
And if this had been an open source project, perhaps it would have had a lot of eyes on it, and that would have been known ahead of time.
Yeah, that's the argument, the common argument that open source advocates put forward.
Yeah.
But one of the big problems is that you really do need to have those eyes put on it.
Right. That's not a guarantee.
It's not a guarantee.
Yeah.
There have been eyes on crypto products in the past. Like, for example, I think Matt Green was part of this effort when VeraCrypt was still around. Was it? No, it was TrueCrypt, the predecessor to VeraCrypt. They did an analysis on TrueCrypt and found that it was the cryptography was implemented well. TrueCrypt eventually shut down, and somebody picked up the code and implemented VeraCrypt with stronger encryption. So that's a way to encrypt files on your hard drive, by the way.
Okay.
So if you need an encrypted volume, a place to store data, like all my tax data is stored in a VeraCrypt volume.
Right.
So that if somebody does get access to my computer, as long as I don't have that file opened as a hard drive on my computer, they will never get that information out because they'd have to know the very long password that I use to store that. And that is stored in my password manager, which is protected with my YubiKey. So it's going to be very difficult for them to get in.
Good luck to you.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah.
But I'm an outlier, I should say, in this.
You sure are, Joe.
Right. I'm incredibly paranoid about having my data breached. I know how to use the encryption products. Not everybody does.
Yeah.
It's not, it's not something there is a learning curve. It's not much of a learning curve.
You have that combination of paranoia and technical know-how that leads you down pathways that most are not willing to tread.
Right. You're like, I'm not following Joe down that dark road.
Right. Well, so a couple other things come to mind here for me. First of all, I wonder if we are moving away from this altogether. It seems to me like the momentum is toward ultimately doing away with usernames and passwords.
Right. Yeah, it's just going to some kind of public key, private key system.
Right. So some alternative that uses other ways to get to log into things, the biometric or who knows. But that seems to be the direction that people want to go in, and I think there's many good reasons for that. So I wonder if this is just something we're biding our time with. You know, in the meantime,
I hope so.
Yeah.
We've been talking about the death of passwords since you and I have been on this show and on the Cyberwire together.
Yeah.
So
true.
And it still hasn't happened yet. I think it is coming. But I mean, I think you're still going to need a password. It's just that all these other layers on top are going to be essentially better. And that password is still going to offer you some level of protection, especially if it's a good, strong password. That just makes it harder. But really, these additional features are going to make it much harder. And that's really where the benefit's going to come in.
Yeah, and I think also one thing this article points out is that this is very much about risk management.
It is.
It's not an all or nothing thing. There's no 100% solution here. It's
Correct.
about, this article points out that for many people, having a notebook in your kitchen drawer with a pencil and paper, that may be the best password manager for you.
It might be. And people laugh at that, but now in order for a malicious actor to get access to your passwords, they have to physically break into your house. That's a much bigger risk for someone to take.
Right.
And if you're just a regular guy like you or me, that nobody's going to take that risk for it, right? But if you're, maybe if you're a high up official in some government agency, then that's your risk model, and somebody might break into your house. So you don't do that.
Right.
You have to assess your own risk model. I often say this, that security is a spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Cryptographers tend to think of security in a very binary way. Right?
Yeah.
Either it's secure or it's not. If I can break it, it's not secure. No matter what I have to do, if it's broken, it's broken.
Mm-hmm.
I understand what they're talking about, because they're thinking about the mathematic problems, the math behind everything.
Yeah.
And they're correct. They're correct. But if you move yourself in a more secure direction, that's better.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't really quantify that. I mean, you can say that one is better than the other. Like we often say that that even an SMS multi-factor authentication code texted to you is better than nothing.
Right.
And it is. But too many people go, well, that's no good. It's not secure at all. And they're correct, but it's still better than nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. So is it fair to say that we're still on Team Password Manager?
I am still on Team Password Manager, yeah.
I am too. I think it's still definitely better. I think it's better to have a password manager than to not have a password manager for many, many reasons, as we've outlined here.
And, and this is not something that has happened to me, because I'm not a LastPass customer. I use the open source products.
Mm-hmm.
But these open source products have in the past been targeted by malware to deliver data exfiltration products that can deliver the unencrypted safe out, or the encrypted safe rather, the encrypted file out. So it's out there.
Yeah,
it's out there.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is my story this week. Joe, what do you have for us?
Dave, once again, I have two stories. The first story is going to make you mad, and the second story is going to make you laugh.
Okay.
And I'm not proud of the first.
I'll be the judge of that.
Right. I'm not proud of the first story coming from this source, but it comes from TMZ.
Oh,
right.
Okay. So is that at the top of your list of in your browser bookmarks? This where you check
in, Dave. I'm very concerned about all the news and sports. And,
sure.
And hip hop and photos and tour. I'm just reading the titles across the top, the menu across the top.
Okay.
So this is a story about a 19-year-old TikToker by the name of Madison Russo, who has been picked up by her local police department in Iowa because she was on TikTok telling people that she has had cancer. Oh. And not just any cancer, but 3 different diagnoses. Diagnoses. She said she had leukemia, then she had pancreatic cancer, and then she had a tumor the size of a football.
Oh.
And she had used TikTok as a way to raise money through GoFundMe and had gotten 439 people to give her $37,000.
Wow.
Somebody called the police and said, I don't, this seems a little bit fishy. And the police swung around, and they found when they went into her house, they found all kinds of things just laying around the house, like oxygen tubes, pills for an anti-nausea medication that they say were just, they weren't prescribed to her, they were prescribed to somebody else, but she was using them as props.
Oh.
Here's a picture, Dave. Here she is with the tube in her nose and smiling and looking good.
Oh yeah.
And she's talking. She has also what looks like one of those drug injection lines that they put in your chest when you're in the hospital.
Right.
I think this picture was just taken in her apartment.
So she did not have cancer. She does not have cancer. She's fine. They subpoenaed her medical records as well and found that she had no diagnosis of cancer. Wow.
So
does she get charged with fraud?
She gets charged with theft is what they charged her with.
Oh, Okay.
And it's a simple charity scam.
Right. I guess this is tough because we all see these sorts of things, especially if you're on social media, and given, for our international listeners, given the sad state of affairs of the U.S. healthcare system, it's pretty common these days to see these sort of GoFundMe campaigns for folks who have outstripped their health insurance or need help with funding. And so you see these things, and sometimes they'll pull your heartstrings, and you'll say, well, there's someone maybe I want to give some money to.
Right.
But it's hard to say, I'd like to give you some money, but first I'm going to need some verification.
Right, yeah, you can't say that.
You don't want to say, prove it.
Right.
And then that's exactly what this woman was taking advantage of, I suppose.
And, she could face up to 10 years in prison for this.
Wow.
So, it's good that she's been stopped. The people that sent her money are probably out the money.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're going to get that back. But, be mindful of who you're giving money to online. The charity scams are out there, and they play on your emotions.
Yeah.
It's a trigger that a lot of us have. I feel bad for that person.
Right.
Generally, I generally don't give to these kind of things. I have in the past when somebody said, hey, I know this guy, and he's going through this, and this is terrible. I've said, okay, I'll send him some money.
Yeah.
But, the person I knew telling me this was somebody I trusted.
Right.
And personally asked me to donate some money, and I donated a little bit of money. And if they scam me out of the $20 I gave them, okay, you got me.
Right.
It doesn't really hurt.
Yeah, it's hard to not take on a certain amount of cynicism in the face of these sorts of things. To still be open to giving,
right,
for the folks who legitimately need it.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. Well, what's your other story, Joe?
My other story comes from Petapixel, and it comes from Pasala Bandara. And the title is, I'm not going to spoil the title, but I'm not going to tell you what it is, but it's about the U.S. Marines and the U.S. Army.
Okay.
Apparently, the U.S. Army set up a camera system that was powered by AI image processing software to monitor an area. And then they
like a security camera.
Like a security camera, right?
Okay, yeah.
And then they said to a group of Marines, I think it was 8 Marines, they said, let's see if you guys can get through this. And Dave, not a single Marine got detected. All they had to do was touch a robot. That was the objective of the exercise, was to get in there and touch a robot.
So at the center of this area, there's a robot.
Right.
And okay.
So
it's
they
like
spent
tag.
They spent
with a robot.
6 days. Right. It's like tag.
Yeah.
6 days training the AI, and then the Marines went in. All 8 of them got through. One pair of Marines did somersaults for 300 meters and got through because the AI didn't recognize them as people coming in.
Oh, because of the movement. So the AI thought, oh, here comes some tumbleweeds or something.
Right.
Nothing to be concerned about.
They didn't recognize it as humans.
Okay.
2 Marines successfully evaded the camera by hiding in a cardboard box, which is a strategy they learned from a video game called Metal Gear Solid.
Oh.
And this is there's a great quote in here. You could hear them giggling the whole time.
So now the Marines are issuing tactical cardboard boxes.
Another Marine field stripped a fir tree and walked like a fir tree. Yeah, field stripped. That's what they used to do with cigarettes. When you were smoking in the field, you'd tear your cigarette apart. That's field stripping. But this guy field stripped a fir tree and then walked in, and the AI camera didn't notice anything.
Oh my gosh!
So I think this is great. We'll put a link in the show notes. It's simple tricks. This is from a forthcoming book. And by the way, this came from Rob, listener Rob, who sent this to us.
Okay.
I want to thank Rob for sending this in, because this is hilarious.
It's like something out of an old Warner Brothers cartoon, like
like Wile E. Coyote with the bush.
Yeah, exactly. Just sneaking in, no one to see here. The bush. That's hilarious. All right. Well, those are our stories for this week, and we would love to hear from you. If there's something you'd like us to consider for the show, you can email us. It's hackinghumans@thecyberwire.com. All right, Joe, it's time to move on to our catch of the day.
Dave, our catch of the day comes from Tim, who says, "Hey, Dave and Joe, I got this really interesting scam email sent to an address I no longer use. It made it past the spam filters, probably because it is actually from PayPal. It's a unique twist on the classic send off an invoice and hope they pay it scam that I've never seen before. What they've done here is send an invoice as though they were Coinbase, which of course they are not. After verifying that it was indeed a legitimate PayPal link with no weird redirectors or anything in the URL, I opened a simplified version of the URL on the VPN and in a sandbox browser, and it did indeed resolve to a legitimate PayPal invoice. So it's again, we're seeing this. This happens a lot where you can get on PayPal and just send anybody an invoice.
Okay.
And tell them, pay me through PayPal. But what these guys have done here is a little bit different than that.
Okay.
So why don't you, this is it looks like an invoice from Coinbase.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, "Dear customer, you sent a payment of $479 to Coinbase Corporation. If you did not make this payment or to cancel this transaction, please call our help desk number. Cancellation after 24 hours from this email won't be valid for refund. Have a great day. PayPal help desk."
Right. And then they give you a phone number.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the scam here. They're trying to get you to call the phone number, and then I'll bet they're going to try to get access to your Coinbase account if you have one.
Oh.
So Coinbase is where you keep cryptocurrency. It's a cryptocurrency exchange.
I see.
So if I'm a scammer and I want to scam a bunch of people out of their cryptocurrency, I'm going to go, where do people keep their cryptocurrency? Well, some of them keep them in exchanges. I'm going to send out a bunch of emails looking like I'm Coinbase about to bill somebody and get them to call me. Then I'm going to have them install the remote access software on their computer. And then I'm going to get access to their Coinbase. And then I'm just going to transfer all the cryptocurrency to my wallets. And that's going to be the game. That's the end of it. You will not get that back. There is no regulation or anything to stop it from happening.
Yeah. It's interesting that they're saying in this email, they want you to call what they're claiming is the PayPal help desk.
Yeah.
Which, of course, it isn't.
That's right.
But I bet you if you call, they'll answer the phone and say, PayPal help desk.
Yep. I'm sure, 100% sure that's the case.
So do you think they're going after your PayPal account, your Coinbase account, or both?
My thinking is they're going at, well, probably both. They might be going after both.
Yeah.
But my thinking initially is they're going after Coinbase.
Oh.
That's because that's where people keep their resources, keep a lot of resources.
Right. What could PayPal be doing to help tamp down this sort of thing? I mean, if it's widespread like this, I'm looking on this for a place to report this as fraud.
Right. There's no place to do that.
Yeah. It does say at the bottom, "Don't know this seller." You can. There's a contact us button.
Us, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I
there it
suppose
is.
there is a way to report it.
Yeah. I don't know how effective that is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the problem with these companies is they're large companies operating with the smallest possible staff they can afford to operate with.
Right.
And, like I say often, when you're dealing with these companies, it's like screaming into the void.
Yeah. You know what, Joe? I need to make up T-shirts that say, "We can't do that at scale."
Right.
Right.
And on the back it says, "Then don't do it."
Right. Don't do that. There you go. All right. Well, thank you, Tim, for sending that in. Tim is a regular contributor to this show and other shows as well. So, friend of the show, Tim, sent this in. We do appreciate it. And again, we would love to hear from you. You can email us at hackinghumans@thecyberwire.com. We were talking about the importance of strong security cultures. As part of their focus on new school security awareness training, KnowBe4 has released a tool called Security Coach that takes alerts from your existing security stack and sends immediate coaching to end users who've taken risky actions. With Security Coach, your users receive contextual, real-time coaching that reinforces your security awareness training and policies, improves knowledge retention, and helps your users to understand the risks associated with their behaviors. Security Coach helps you take a data-driven approach to quantifying and reducing human risk by combining your existing security layers with real-time behavioral coaching and new school security awareness training. Doing this significantly improves the understanding and retention of your users, leading to a stronger security culture across your whole organization. Learn more about Security Coach at knowbefore.com/securitycoach. That's knowbefore.com/securitycoach. Joe, I recently had the pleasure of speaking with Keith Jarvis. He is a senior security researcher at SecureWorks, and we were talking about infostealers and trackers. Here's my conversation with Keith Jarvis.
Right. So over the last several years, we've really seen this particular way of getting into networks sort of explode. Right. So infostealers stealing credentials, nothing really new there. That's been with us for decades. But there's just the ecosystem is really flush with options for threat actors to go in and buy infostealers that steal essentially everything off of a computer. They can choose one that's hosted by the threat actors or one that they host themselves. Really, they go from very basic up to advanced capabilities. And what we've seen from SecureWorks' perspective over the last several years is that credentials are increasingly being used as the point of entry into corporate networks, which then leads to really large ransomware incidents.
Can you walk us through the typical life cycle of something like this with an infostealer? I mean, how does one find themselves victim of it? And then ultimately, how do the credentials end up for sale?
Right. So again, there's so many of these infostealers that are for sale, and there's so many customers. Really, how you end up getting one is basically how you get anything. I mean, there's just so many people involved with this. It may come in through a spam email. It may come in through pirated software that's been laden with one of these infostealers. Somebody may break into your network through other means, and then they also want to capture credentials from the computers that they've gotten access to. So they'll drop one of these infostealers on there. So there's a lot of different ways that these are getting into corporate networks. And then from there, it's sort of like potluck what happens to your stolen credentials. Some of these threat actors their business model is to steal credentials and then to sell them on the open market and try to make money that way, not by actually monetizing the machines they broke into, but basically just a smash and grab operation where they get stuff and then they bundle it and then they sell it online. From there, on those marketplaces where that data is sold, really it's anyone's guess who's going to actually end up purchasing that lot. Sometimes it's going to be people looking for cryptocurrency, maybe people looking for infrastructure to run another operation. But oftentimes we've seen it's going to be somebody who wants to break into a corporate network and distribute ransomware throughout that network.
Yeah, one of the things that I see you all highlighted was the ability for folks to go onto one of these markets and basically make a request to say, these are the types of things I'm interested in.
Yeah, and that's kind of a new feature. There's a place called Russian Market that introduced that in October, the ability to say, hey, I have a specific interest in this platform or this website, so I'm going to put that out there as a sort of pre-sale request. And then hopefully a vendor on that website is going to say, oh, this person wants this domain for this amount of money, so I'm going to go hunt for that. In the past, it's usually been they distribute these infostealers in mass, and then basically what you might typically expect to find on a computer: Gmail addresses, WinSCP credentials, these sorts of things. That's what comes back into what they call the logs, and then those are sort of bundled up and sold, and you basically what's for sale is what they're providing, right? You don't get any choice into what they've actually compromised. But with this, you can say, oh, I want to get into some major e-commerce platform, or I know that software vendor uses this internal administrative interface, so I'm going to provide the URL as a mask and see where I can get those specific types of credentials that I can use in a particular type of intrusion.
What about at the high end? Like, as you mentioned here, folks who want specific access to, let's say, a Fortune 500 company or something like that. Is that available as well?
Yeah, so usually with the marketplaces, that's really you're working in bulk data, but there's an entire cottage industry of what we call initial access brokers, the people who get into the network first and then they're looking to sell that access. They don't want to do the rest of the intrusion. So a lot of that happens on places like Telegram or on the underground forums where they'll say, I have access to a Fortune 50 company in the US and that has X amount of revenue. I'm selling this for $15,000, or it may be something much less interesting than that. I have a Japanese company with 10 million in revenue, and here's access for $200. So that's usually where they've identified what they think is high value, and they know that they can get more money out of selling that than just bundling it with everybody else's credentials.
One of the things that strikes me is the professionalism that's going on behind the scenes here. I mean, am I right that these organizations really, they're set up like legitimate businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. So, especially with these markets over the last 4 or 5 years, there was nothing really like this just that long ago. This is kind of, I think, the credit card theft that was rampant a number of years ago. These sort of shops popped up to service that market, stolen credit cards. And this is sort of the continuum of that because it's increasingly difficult to monetize stolen payment cards. So what we saw as innovation, a number of years ago in that space has now moved over to credentials. And you're right, these are all very automated, slick platforms for just going in and really quickly searching for what you want that day and then buying it. And again, now requesting, specific bespoke intrusions based on, a mask or something like that. So it's really sort of mechanized and professionalized over the last several years, and it makes it really easy, and it lowers the bar for certain threat actors to really get into this game.
And what interest are you all seeing, if any, from law enforcement to monitor this and try to tamp down on it?
Yeah, so it's an increasingly prevalent way of getting into corporate networks from our telemetry over the last several years. It's definitely on law enforcement's radar here in the United States and abroad in the UK, et cetera. I don't know specifically what they're trying to do. I know they've gone after payment card forums and marketplaces. They've just recently gone after DDoS booting services. One imagines that they're teeing something up for these particular types of markets, but we know that justice works very slowly, so I'm not sure when that's going to actually happen, but I'm assured that it's a priority for those groups.
So what are your recommendations then for organizations who want to best protect themselves here? What sort of things should they put in place?
Right, so good security controls, at the perimeter, preventing spam emails from getting in, preventing people from downloading stuff while browsing the web, but something is going to get through eventually. So having really good telemetry and visibility into your endpoints to see when one of these infostealers lands, that you can identify it and quarantine that machine as soon as possible. And then after that, don't just image the machine and sort of go on about your business. You really have to say, okay, this machine has been completely harvested of all the private information that was on it. And that's going to be a mixture of data that belonged to the individual that was using that machine, and also probably a lot of corporate secrets. So you really have to do an accounting of what was stolen there, and to do password resets to help that individual, reset the things in their own personal life, their banking details and stuff like that, because you can't just assume because you wipe the malware that it's no longer a threat. And I think also, obviously, multi-factor authentication, the more critical assets you can put that in front of, the better prepared you are going to be when one of these things does happen and somebody does try and come back with credentials and get in.
Yeah, I mean, is that really the key for the consumer to have good password hygiene?
Yeah, absolutely. But as we're asking people to get better about their hygiene, they're forgetting their passwords. So they're storing them in the browser. They're storing them in password managers, which is nominally a good thing. But that also means that there's a giant cache of credentials on every machine in the world now, where the software comes in and steals it. So it's kind of a mixed blessing. I think it's a net positive that we're moving people towards that. But this is kind of one of the downsides of that, is that people are storing these things. You're not in text files and Excel spreadsheets anymore, but in proper password managers. But still, it is a concern.
Where do you suppose we're headed here? You know, you're mentioning that the folks who previously had been working in credit cards, stolen credit cards, have moved on to this. I mean, is there a natural evolution that's going on here as cat and mouse?
No, I think we're in the full swing of this particular era of credential theft. I think the increasing adoption of MFA and especially advanced options with MFA. So like with Microsoft 365, you can get a push notification, and we know that attackers are spamming those push notifications and just getting through anyway. They've introduced number matching, where you have to match a number with the actual prompt. That prevents that type of attack. The same with the standard one-time codes, which can be intercepted and then replayed, within a 30-second window. So people are moving past that, and that's really what's going to crush this particular ecosystem. But we know that's sort of a lagging indicator. There's always going to be the top 1% of security places that can push that out first, and everyone else is going to lag behind. So I think we're in for this particular type of attack for a number of years to come.
Joe, what do you think?
Interesting interview. Infostealers can take everything, but I think credentials are really what they're after the most. Because once they get the credentials, they can get access. An infostealer is just software, and Keith was talking about how advanced these software packages can be, and how, but still, they're just going to do what they're told.
Right.
A malicious actor with access to your network is much more dangerous than the software.
Oh,
they're going to have that, like they're not going to be distracted by they're going to look, hey, that's a person under a box. Right.
right.
The software something may escape software's notice, but not a human. A human's going to be looking around, taking notice, and stealing all the data they can.
Yeah. So a human has a adaptive curiosity.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's a good way to put it. There are tons of vectors for this stuff to get into your network, which is just terrible. And Keith talks about, the spam emails and all that, phishing emails.
Yeah.
And then all the other vectors as well, fake tech support phone calls, anything. Think about the threat model where someone is selling access to your network. Sometimes when I think about penetration into a network, I think that this is more like a personal operation. Like the first guy, there's somebody out there that wants to get into the network. So what do? They go in and they get access, and now that they've got access, they go up to the next thing and they go, okay, now we got to spread through the network, and now we've got to finally do something to monetize this.
Right.
But it's interesting to me that there's like a marketplace for these initial access people. These are guys that just go, can I get in here? Yes, I can. Okay, I'm in. I'm done.
Yeah.
Let me cash out here. Let me monetize just the access part.
Right.
I haven't done anything that would draw the attention of law enforcement. Let somebody else take that risk.
Right.
So I'm just going to get some, get some money from somebody that's going to do something bad, and the whole marketplace is fascinating to me. But then what you've got to think about is, what's the malicious actor, the guy that's actually going to do the damage? What does that person look like? They are somebody out to just make money off of you, right? They don't care how it is. They're willing to pay for the access, and they're looking to do as much damage as they can to maximize their profits.
Right.
So the paradigm has to be that while you're looking for the initial access person, that's not the same guy that's going to come in and wreak havoc on your network. It's just some person that's good at getting initial access. And you've got to think of it like the marketplace and the organization that these companies have. You and I have been talking about the development of this organization, and it's been absolutely one of the most fascinating things to watch over time.
Yeah.
How these guys have become specialized.
It's like an Ocean's 11 team.
Right, exactly.
Each person has their specialty. You got the safe cracker. You got the social engineer.
I was thinking Henry Ford and specialization, right?
Yeah.
When he made cars affordable by just having people do small pieces. Now this malicious activity can be done at scale because people can do their parts very quickly.
Right.
And move it down the cyber assembly line.
Yeah.
Access prices are interesting too. Keith provides examples from $200 to $15,000. I don't want to take the time to learn how to hack. I just want to get access, and I'm pretty good at that. So it's all still just basically commerce. It's a black market, but it's a market.
Right.
One of the things that Keith says it's really important is you can't just wipe the machine and move on, that a lot of things have already happened. You've already suffered a data breach when there's an information stealer on a computer. You can't, when you have a malware incident, that can't just be, well, we'll just wipe the computer and that's it. We're done. And I like what Keith says. You got to tell the user, do you have any personal information on here? Is any of your banking information on here? You better change all of that because you've been compromised too. And usually the user is the one who initiated the activity that got the malicious software on there in the first place. Principle of least privilege is a pretty good way to go about that and limiting that risk. Make sure that if the user doesn't need to have administrative access to the machine or install software, then that user shouldn't have those permissions on your hardware.
Right.
Again, we hear multi-factor authentication.
Yeah.
And still, password managers are good. Protect them with multi-factor authentication too, but we've already talked about that in your story a lot today.
That's right. All right. Well, interesting stuff. And again, our thanks to Keith Jarvis from SecureWorks for joining us. We do appreciate him taking the time. We want to thank all of you for listening, and of course, we want to thank our sponsors at KnowBe4. That is our show. We want to thank all of you for listening. Our thanks to Harbor Labs and the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute for their participation. You can learn more at harborlabs.com and isi.jhu.edu. The Hacking Humans podcast is proudly produced in Maryland at the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our senior producer is Jennifer Iben. Our executive editor is Peter Kilpie. I'm Dave Bittner.
And I'm Joe Kerrigan.
Thanks for listening.